Pluto had already died once as a soldier, watching his homeland fall before his own eyes. Just when everything seemed over, a mysterious golden light reached out to him and gave him a second chance. When he opened his eyes, he found himself in a completely different world. 3 years later, Pluto was now a student at a hunter academy, where everyone's future depended on a single awakening ceremony. Ever since dungeons appeared across the world, humanity had survived by awakening powerful classes, and the stronger your class was, the brighter your future became. Unlike everyone else, Pluto wasn't chasing fame. He wanted enough power to protect his country from suffering the same fate it did in his previous life. With a perfect talent score of 200, everyone believed he would awaken one of the strongest classes in history. Even the nation's greatest guild, the Blue Dragon Guild, was expected to recruit him immediately. As Pluto placed his hand on the awakening sphere, an enormous burst of blue energy covered the entire arena. The crowd was certain a legendary class had appeared. But a second later, everything changed. The system announced that Pluto had awakened as a necromancer. The entire arena fell silent. Although many students thought it was a rare class, they quickly learned the truth. Necromancer was considered one of the weakest C-class awakenings, instantly turning the Academy's greatest genius into its biggest disappointment. Even the instructors who had praised him moments earlier looked at him with pity. But while everyone else focused on his class, Pluto noticed something far more important. His summoning skill had no limit. Instead of being restricted to a few undead, he could summon as many skeleton soldiers as his mana allowed. With just 10 mana, he could already command 10 undead warriors. At that moment, Pluto realized everyone had misunderstood his class. This wasn't a weak ability. It was the beginning of an unstoppable undead army. Ignoring the mockery around him, Pluto decided to head straight for the Academy's special trial dungeon to test his new power. Along the way, Adrian Blackwood mocked him, and even offered to make the former genius his personal lackey. Pluto ignored every insult, knowing actions would speak louder than words. Soon after, Luna approached and sincerely offered to help him level up. She believed someone with a perfect talent score couldn't possibly be ordinary. Pluto appreciated her kindness, but politely refused. He declared that he would reach the top on his own and become powerful enough to surpass every so-called superior class. Without wasting another second, Pluto entered the Academy's trial dungeon alone. The moment he stepped outside the safe zone, a pack of level 1 void dogs charged straight at him. Pluto calmly summoned 2 skeleton warriors. Within seconds, the undead soldiers cut through the monsters with incredible precision, proving that his new class was far stronger than anyone had imagined. As the system rewarded him with experience, Pluto remembered every insult he had suffered that day, along with the memories of watching his homeland fall in his previous life. Clenching his fist, he made himself one final promise. This time, he would become strong enough that no one would ever look down on him again. Pluto calculates that summoning 10 undead soldiers is enough to conquer the first floor. To maximize efficiency, he assigns 2 skeletons to each canine monster. The glowing-eyed warriors overwhelm the beasts, earning steady experience as Pluto realizes he will reach level 2 within minutes. Since his stamina regenerates quickly, he knows brief rests are all he needs before sending his undead army to eliminate every remaining enemy. After several victories, a surge of purple energy signals his first level up. The system rewards him with 5 attribute points and partial mana recovery. Believing mana is the key to survival, Pluto invests every point into it, increasing his summon limit to 15 warriors and preparing himself for the next floor. On the second floor, stronger wolves replace the weaker enemies. Pluto notices the increased danger, but continues leveling with ease. Raising his magic to 20, creates a perfect cycle of endless summons and quick eliminations. As he ventures deeper, monstrous shadow horses appear, yet he treats them as nothing more than additional experience. His skeletons defeat them one after another, allowing him to command 30 summoned minions. Soon, Pluto reaches level 5. The system removes the evolution restriction, allowing skeletons to absorb defeated enemies and evolve into stronger forms such as armored knights. He also unlocks a new explosive gunpowder skeleton skill. Confident in its destructive potential, he heads to the 5th floor trial, where armored rhinoceroses roam the dry plains. Realizing swords are ineffective, he transforms several skeletons into living bombs. Their explosive attack devastates the beasts, proving the new skill far more powerful than its appearance suggests. Pluto recognizes that greater mana will let him use this strategy even more often. Although the trials grant huge amounts of experience, They provide no equipment, so Pluto exits the dungeon to visit the equipment district. His teacher is stunned to see him return unharmed at level 5, and immediately reports the unbelievable achievement to the principal. At first, the principal dismisses Pluto because of his lowest-ranked class, but he is left speechless after learning that a beginner reached the 5th floor in only an hour. Outside, Pluto discovers that even basic gear is far too expensive. Determined to earn equipment himself, he enters a high-difficulty mountain dungeon, summoning spear-wielding skeletons. He defeats waves of stone rhinos before a massive beast emerges. Physical attacks barely affect its rocky armor, so Pluto once again relies on explosive skeletons. The walking bombs destroy the monster, grant another level, and convince him to convert his entire army into explosive units. As countless explosions wipe out the battlefield, Pluto reaches level 6. The dungeon boss soon appears, a colossal stone rhino king. Instead of confronting it directly, Pluto reveals that nearly 100 explosive skeletons have already surrounded the creature. A simultaneous detonation engulfs the boss, instantly defeating it and pushing Pluto to level 7. Among the remains, an epic rock staff drops. The weapon grants 30 magic and 10 defense, making it far beyond anything he could afford. With the staff equipped, his total magic rises to 75, allowing him to command 75 undead warriors at once. Returning to the main hall, Pluto encounters Adrian and his followers blocking the path. Mistaking Pluto for a weak outcast, Adrian and his group mock him and try to recruit him as a servant while insulting his rank. Pluto remains silent until he finally steps forward, fixes his rival with a cold stare glowing with purple magic, and ends the confrontation with a single harsh warning that leaves no room for further disrespect. Adrian's pride is shattered, and in anger he grabs Pluto, demanding a response. Before the situation escalates, one of his teammates reminds him that fighting inside the academy lobby would send everyone involved to jail. Their confrontation draws the attention of nearby students and hunters until a security guard steps in to break it up. Caught in the act, Adrian pretends it was harmless, but the guard orders everyone to leave. Before walking away, Adrian vows to kill Pluto once they meet outside the safe zone. Pluto silently thinks he would have ended the fight himself if he had not been interrupted. The guard later advises him to report any future trouble. Pluto heads toward a high-level red portal despite the guard's warning. The guard suddenly notices the epic staff in Pluto's hands and realizes the young necromancer had already cleared the gold difficulty Rocky Mountain dungeon alone. Shocked by such an impossible achievement, he watches Pluto enter the portal for another run. Determined to use all 4 daily dungeon attempts, Pluto quickly repeats the gold dungeon with his skeletal army. Explosive skeletons effortlessly destroy the Rhino King again, earning another huge amount of experience. The strategy continues, wiping out bosses with overwhelming explosions, while valuable weapons and armor fill his inventory. Since none suit his class, he decides to sell them later. After finishing his runs, Pluto reaches level 9 with 85 magic and rests before the Academy's professional novice examination. The next morning, the Academy is packed with excited students, proudly discussing reaching level 4 through teamwork. Pluto finds their progress surprisingly slow. Adrian appears once again, boasting about reaching level 5 and mocking Pluto's solo efforts. But the principal interrupts to begin the examination. The principal announces that the top 5 students will be recruited by the Academy's main guild, while first place will receive an epic item. The reward amazes everyone. He introduces the respected elder Aaron Crowley, a level 75 mage responsible for creating the exam monsters. Competitors must defeat as many enemies as possible within 30 minutes. Although the students panic at first, Aaron reassures them that the monsters will remain weak and that anyone can request rescue if necessary. Adrian resumes provoking Pluto, claiming he will humiliate him after joining the elite ranks. Pluto responds by proposing a wager based on the final rankings to settle who is truly stronger. Adrian accepts and declares that whoever loses must crawl on the ground and bark like a dog before the entire academy. Pluto calmly agrees. The examination officially begins as the students enter their assigned rooms. Aaron activates a massive teleportation spell that transports every participant into separate arenas. Pluto arrives in his battlefield, where level 1 bronze soldiers armed with spears emerge before him. He summons his skeleton warriors and watches them easily overpower the first wave. Pluto quickly concludes that the enemies pose little threat as long as he commands multiple summons. Outside the arena, Aaron notices one competitor defeating enemies at an unbelievable pace, and increases the difficulty. More bronze soldiers appear before Pluto, but his undead forces continue holding their ground with ease, each skeleton defeating multiple opponents at once. The observers are stunned when 10 bronze soldiers are eliminated almost instantly. Curious about the top performer, the teachers display the live rankings. To everyone's disbelief, Pluto's name sits alone at the top of the leaderboard, with his score climbing every few seconds. His overwhelming performance leaves the staff wondering whether his talent exceeds anything they have ever witnessed. And even Aaron admits the boy possesses extraordinary potential. Excited to test Pluto's limits, Aaron pours even more magic into the arena. Pluto casually compares the exam to the Rhino dungeon and finds it far easier. Suddenly, a massive wall of green light fills the battlefield before revealing dozens of bronze warriors surrounding him from every direction. Instead of panicking, Pluto smiles, accepts the challenge, and summons 30 skeletal soldiers, preparing his undead army for an even greater battle. In the neighboring arena, Adrian charges through the bronze soldiers with his massive axe, determined to outscore Pluto. As he fights, he recalls earning 707 talent points 2 years earlier, a result that made him the pride of his classmates. That memory is immediately overshadowed by the recent talent test, where Pluto achieved a perfect 200 points. The principal had praised Pluto as the nation's top talent and urged the elite students to match his potential. Humiliated by the comparison, Adrian, heir to the Blackwood family, refuses to accept being measured against an orphan and vows to surpass him. Back in the present, Adrian continues defeating enemies and reaches 15 points, convinced his class will crush the Necromancer. At the same moment, Pluto's skeleton army tears through wave after wave of bronze soldiers, pushing his score to 79, and then 100. Although he loses 14 skeletons during the battle, he calmly accepts the casualties and prepares to summon replacements, realizing the enemy numbers have increased dramatically. Outside the arena, the principal, security guard, and exam staff are stunned as Pluto breaks the Academy's long-standing record, with half the tests still remaining. Aaron Crowley realizes more than 100 of his summoned soldiers have already been destroyed. Determined to challenge Pluto further, he pours even more magic into the arena, despite the growing concern of the others. Aaron eventually admits he may have summoned far too many enemies, potentially placing Pluto in mortal danger. Inside the arena, Pluto faces an enormous army of bronze soldiers stretching across the battlefield. Instead of retreating, he decides it is time to unleash his strongest weapon. With a snap of his fingers, he transforms several skeletons into explosive gunpowder skeletons, carrying massive flaming barrels. The volatile undead rush straight into the enemy ranks. As the observers consider ending the exam to save Pluto, one instructor orders everyone to wait after noticing the rapidly rising scoreboard. Pluto's elimination count leaps from 295 to 350 within moments, leaving the staff speechless. Even Aaron begins to believe the young necromancer could become one of the nation's greatest hopes. The explosions continue to devastate the battlefield. Pluto's score surges past 800, then 900, as endless waves of bronze soldiers are blown apart. Walking calmly through the smoke, Pluto notices a handful of survivors and orders his remaining skeletons to finish them off. Soon, his total reaches an astonishing 1,000 eliminations, making him wonder if he had gone too far. When the elimination counter finally stops, the Academy staff realizes Pluto has completely annihilated Aaron's entire bronze army. Amazed by the unprecedented result, Aaron declares that he will personally visit the mysterious student who achieved the impossible. After hearing that the examiner was leaving, the guard anxiously reminded him that the evaluation had not yet concluded, and worried about the students still participating in the remaining test areas. A powerful ring of magic surrounded the veteran mage, as he assured everyone that the spells maintaining the other examination rooms would continue functioning without his presence. Curious about the unusual situation, the bearded examiner decided to witness it himself, believing that if the rumors were true, the young contestant's potential would be beyond measure. Moments later, a brilliant burst of magic illuminated the arena, as the high-ranking mage instantly teleported away. Having defeated every opponent in sight, the young necromancer wearing a dark suit finally relaxed beside his towering skeletal warriors. He realized that overcoming more than 100 summoned enemies would have been nearly impossible without relying on his devastating explosive magic. Before he could fully rest, a glowing blue magic circle appeared behind him. Assuming another wave of enemies had arrived, he watched carefully as only one figure slowly emerged from the magical portal. Driven by instinct, the skeletal beasts immediately rushed toward the newcomer, surrounding the lone intruder before launching a perfectly coordinated assault. Their blades descended with lethal precision, but the attack stopped completely, just inches from its target after the visitor effortlessly froze every weapon in place, with a single spell, calmly examining the undead soldiers from up close. The veteran evaluator silently noted how unusual the boy's summons truly were. Caught off guard by the examiner's unexpected appearance, the student wondered why the overseer had entered the arena during the trial. The older mage explained that only C-Rank Necromancers possessed abilities like these, and the boy admitted that this was indeed his class. However, the examiner immediately pointed out a major inconsistency. Necromancers of that rank were restricted to summoning only once every 30 minutes, yet dozens of undead already stood across the battlefield. As the realization struck him, the student grew visibly nervous, while the examiner demanded an explanation for how such a massive army had been assembled in so little time. Understanding that his hidden ability had finally been exposed, the young necromancer struggled with whether revealing the truth was the right choice. The examiner made it clear that excuses were unnecessary. His only concern was determining whether the student's overwhelming power could be safely controlled for the protection of the nation. Remembering the purpose behind the second chance he had been given in life, the boy concluded that earning the trust of such an influential mage was essential. Choosing to reveal only part of his true strength, he slowly raised his arm, as waves of mana gathered around him. Purple flames enveloped his body, releasing such an enormous amount of magical energy that even the experienced evaluator was impressed. 2 additional skeletal creatures materialized before the elder mage, while the student explained the ordinary limitations placed on necromancers, including the lengthy summoning cooldown and the 1-hour lifespan of summoned creatures. With glowing violet eyes, the young necromancer calmly revealed that none of those restrictions applied to him. The countless skeletal weapons scattered throughout the ruined battlefield served as undeniable proof that his summons possessed no such limits. Hearing that a first-year student had achieved unrestricted necromancy left the veteran completely stunned. The revelation of seemingly limitless summoning ability was almost impossible to believe. Seeking confirmation, the examiner asked whether the boy could command an endless army using nothing more than his mana reserves. The student confirmed that he could. After carefully studying him, the elder mage realized that the young necromancer's worth extended far beyond that of an exceptionally talented student. Convinced of his extraordinary value, he declared that he would personally report everything to the president of the Azure Dragon Guild to ensure the boy's future received the support it deserved. As green magic gathered around the examiner for his departure, the student understood that the guild president was the person being mentioned. Unexpectedly, the teleportation spell failed, leaving both of them momentarily confused. Before attempting to leave again, the elder mage reached into his belongings and presented the boy with a small golden key as a personal gift from his guild. The young necromancer stared at the glowing artifact in disbelief, struggling to understand the significance of what he had just received. The examiner asked whether he had ever learned about the legendary Blessing Rifts. The student calmly replied that he had studied the rare phenomenon during his academy lessons. These extraordinary rifts were known for housing monsters of terrifying strength, while rewarding explorers with experience far beyond what ordinary dungeons could offer. Even more legendary were the special keys capable of opening such rifts, treasures so rare that finding one was considered nearly impossible. Only then did the boy fully grasp that the examiner was entrusting him with one of those legendary artifacts. Maintaining a firm expression, the elder mage confirmed that the gift was genuine and carefully placed the golden key into the student's hands. The key would grant access to a blessing rift a single time. Soon afterward, the teleportation spell activated successfully, and the veteran disappeared within a beam of green light, leaving the arena behind. Holding the golden key tightly, as purple light shone in his eyes, the young necromancer resolved to explore the mysterious rift after completing the examination. Meanwhile, outside the testing grounds, the academy principal announced that the time limit had expired, and that the entrance exam had officially come to an end. One exhausted participant leaned heavily on his sword, relieved that the grueling challenge was finally over. Looking around at the devastated battlefield, he reflected on the enormous number of enemies he had defeated. Proud of his performance, the warrior confidently believed that eliminating 40 opponents had secured him the title of the academy's strongest student. Soon after, The loudspeakers instructed every participant to assemble in the courtyard for the announcement of the examination results. As the examination came to an end, exhausted students slowly filled the academy courtyard, creating a restless crowd of anxious faces waiting for the results. Many complained about the overwhelming difficulty of the test, with some disappointed that they had earned only 7 or 15 points despite their efforts. Moving confidently through the gathering, the arrogant warrior in red armor searched for his rival. Convinced that the young necromancer had fled after performing poorly, another student pointed him toward the side of the courtyard, where Pluto stood quietly waiting with complete composure. Wearing a smug expression, the warrior marched directly toward him. Without showing the slightest courtesy, he grabbed Pluto by the tie and mocked him for remaining at the academy. The necromancer ignored every insult, calmly keeping one hand near the precious golden key hidden safely inside his pocket. Leaning closer, the red-haired student threatened that Pluto would soon disgrace himself before the entire school. Already imagining victory, he eagerly anticipated seeing his rival publicly humiliated. Before the confrontation could continue, the academy principal appeared on the balcony above and requested complete silence. Holding a holographic clipboard, he explained that only the 5 highest scores from the first day of testing would be announced. 5th place was awarded to Tristan, with 39 points, a result that immediately impressed the crowd. The arrogant warrior laughed confidently, knowing his own score was even higher. Moments later, 4th place was announced with 41 points, confirming his position. Delighted, he immediately expected Pluto to admit defeat. But the necromancer simply reminded him that the rankings were not finished yet. The announcement continued with Luna securing 3rd place after earning 77 points. Students praised the remarkable achievements of her support-based abilities. Soon afterward, Colin was revealed as the runner-up with 95 points, leaving him stunned as he wondered who could possibly have surpassed such an incredible score. The principal paused briefly before gathering himself to reveal the final result. Then, with a voice that echoed across the courtyard, he declared Pluto the champion, with a flawless score of 1,000 points. Silence immediately spread throughout the academy. For several long moments, nobody could believe what they had just heard. The impossible score had shattered every previous school record, leaving students completely speechless. Luna stared in amazement, while others struggled to understand how someone from such an ordinary necromancer class had accomplished the feat. Colin quickly realized that achieving such a total would have required eliminating enemies at an unbelievable pace throughout the examination. Meanwhile, the arrogant warrior's confidence completely collapsed. His face turned pale as the reality of his overwhelming defeat settled in. Barely able to think clearly, he approached Pluto from behind in search of some logical explanation. Remaining perfectly calm, the necromancer simply reminded him that their wager had already been decided. Unable to accept the outcome, the defeated student immediately accused the champion of cheating. Pluto responded with quiet confidence, questioning whether his rival truly intended to abandon the promise he had made before the test. The surrounding students burst into laughter as they remembered the condition of the bet, which required the loser to bark like a dog before everyone present. Overcome by humiliation and rage, the defeated warrior stomped across the grass before collapsing onto the ground in frustration. Refusing to believe reality, he insisted that a low-ranked necromancer could never legitimately earn a score of 1,000 points. The crowd urged him to preserve what little dignity remained by honoring the wager, while another student silently observed the growing commotion from a distance. Once order returned, the principal resumed the ceremony and announced that the tournament champion would receive an epic-grade piece of equipment provided by the prestigious Dragon Guild. Pluto was invited onto the stage, and before leaving, he dismissed his rival with cold indifference, making it clear that he had no interest in wasting any more time on him. Left behind on the ground, the defeated warrior shouted bitter threats, claiming that his superior rank would eventually allow him to surpass the necromancer. Consumed by jealousy, he swore that Pluto would suffer a miserable fate in the future. Those reckless words finally caused the champion to stop. Slowly turning around, Pluto fixed his rival with a chilling gaze. At that instant, an enormous skull formed from dense purple energy appeared behind him, radiating an overwhelming aura of fear and destruction. The terrifying manifestation completely shattered the warrior's confidence. Frozen in place by pure terror, he stumbled backward in panic, unable to withstand the immense pressure surrounding the necromancer. With his opponent thoroughly silenced, Pluto turned away without another glance. His expression remained completely emotionless as he climbed the long staircase leading toward the ceremony stage. Every student watched silently, while the Academy's newest champion made his way upward. Upon reaching the stage, the smiling principal congratulated him and placed a hand on his shoulder. He explained that the Dragon Guild had prepared 3 valuable rewards for the winner. Magical projections of a sword, a suit of armor, and an enchanted cloak appeared before the audience, as Pluto was invited to make his choice. The young necromancer carefully examined each item. The sword and heavy armor were clearly intended for close-range fighters, and offered him little practical value. That left only the enchanted cloak as the ideal reward. He accepted the dark garment, and immediately sensed its powerful effect, discovering that the additional mana it provided would allow him to summon roughly 50 more undead soldiers than before. The principal then raised Pluto's hand before the assembled crowd, officially declaring him the undisputed champion of the first day's examination. Cheers erupted across the courtyard as countless students celebrated the Academy's newest prodigy. Standing beneath the warm afternoon sunlight, Pluto allowed himself a faint smile while quietly appreciating the remarkable achievement he had earned. As the ceremony concluded, the principal announced that the next major examination would be held 1 month later, encouraging every student to continue training until then. Later that day, the story shifted to a modest apartment within an aging residential complex. Back inside his small room, Pluto examined the mysterious golden key that had been entrusted to him earlier by Aaron. Remembering the instructions he had studied, he infused the artifact with dark mana. The key immediately burst with brilliant light, releasing streams of purple energy that tore open space itself. A distorted dimensional rift gradually formed before him, revealing that the legendary artifact possessed the power to create gateways to another realm. As he prepared to enter, Aaron's earlier advice echoed in his thoughts, reminding him that exploring such dangerous places alongside a healer would greatly improve his chances of survival. After a brief moment of consideration, Pluto silently rejected the suggestion. Determined to rely only on himself, he chose to ignore the warning, step toward the dimensional portal, and embrace the path he had always preferred, facing every challenge entirely alone. Surge of distorted energy filled the small room as the mysterious portal fully opened. The dimensional passage engulfed the young necromancer in brilliant light, carrying him into the hidden realm beyond. After crossing the barrier, Pluto found himself inside a rugged canyon deep within the special dungeon. Carefully surveying the unfamiliar environment, he quickly identified the creatures roaming the area. The monsters were level 9 leopards, with relatively low durability, but they compensated for that weakness with incredible speed and devastating attack power. Recognizing the danger immediately, Pluto decided that allowing the beasts to close the distance would be a fatal mistake. He struck the ground lightly before summoning an entire formation of skeletal warriors. At his command, the undead raised massive shields and assembled into an unbreakable defensive wall around their master. The predators charged without hesitation, throwing themselves against the shield formation. Instead of breaking through, they were met by rows of waiting spears that pierced them as they attacked, ending their lives almost instantly. Notifications appeared one after another, awarding experience for every defeated monster. Pluto was surprised to discover that even the weakest enemies inside the Blessing Rift granted an enormous amount of experience compared to ordinary dungeons. After clearing the entrance, he decided it was time to advance deeper into the canyon. As he continued forward, however, he realized that keeping every summon focused entirely on defense was limiting his overall offensive strength. One of the shadowy leopards suddenly attempted an ambush from behind, but a sword-wielding skeleton intercepted it before the attack could land. The undead warrior sliced the beast cleanly in half with a single strike, earning even more experience for its master. A brilliant emerald light surrounded Pluto, as the accumulated experience finally pushed him to level 10. Feeling a surge of power flow through his body, he opened his status panel and discovered that reaching the milestone had unlocked a brand new ability. The newly acquired skill summoned an enormous demonic eye, capable of inflicting overwhelming mental terror upon anyone who looked into it. Pluto quickly analyzed the technique and realized that its duration depended on the enemy's strength, making it an exceptional crowd control ability. Most people dismissed the spell because it normally carried a 24-hour cooldown after every use. However, Pluto immediately recognized that his unique talent ignored cooldown restrictions entirely, allowing him to cast the ability repeatedly without limitation. Before he could continue exploring, a deafening roar echoed across the canyon. Massive footsteps shook the rocky ground, as an enormous leopard emerged from deeper within the dungeon. Covered in glowing crimson markings, the gigantic beast radiated an aura far beyond that of the ordinary monsters surrounding it. Pluto was genuinely surprised to encounter the dungeon's ruler so early in his exploration. Without wasting a moment, he ordered every skeletal warrior to surround the colossal predator and eliminate it without mercy. The beast answered with overwhelming force, charging forward like an unstoppable battering ram. It smashed directly through the defensive formation. With blinding speed, its claws tore through armor and bone alike, scattering shattered skeletons across the battlefield. Watching the battle unfold, Pluto quickly realized that the monster's speed was simply too overwhelming for conventional military formations. One skeleton after another was destroyed before they could inflict meaningful damage, making it obvious that his army would eventually be wiped out if the battle continued this way. Seeing no alternative, the young necromancer gripped his arcane scythe. Chaotic magical energy erupted around him as crimson waves spread across the battlefield, distorting the very air. Above the canyon, an enormous sphere of blazing dark power condensed, filling the entire area with crushing pressure. Remaining perfectly calm, Pluto activated his newly acquired skill for the first time. He deliberately drew the beast's attention toward himself. Acting on instinct, the gigantic leopard lifted its head and locked eyes with the source of the challenge. The moment its gaze met the colossal demonic eye, overwhelming fear consumed the creature. Its body stiffened instantly, as terror completely paralyzed every movement. Pluto watched with satisfaction, confirming that the spell worked exactly as expected. Ghostly skulls surrounded by crimson flames hovered throughout the battlefield, creating a horrifying illusion that overwhelmed the monster's mind. Unable to resist the invisible psychological pressure, the dungeon boss withdrew its claws and remained frozen in place. After briefly observing the effect, Pluto estimated that the paralysis would last only 5 seconds because of the difference in power between himself and the boss. Fortunately, 5 seconds were more than enough. Without hesitation, he summoned specialized skeletons carrying massive barrels of explosive powder. More undead quickly joined them, each transporting identical explosive payloads toward the immobilized monster. Flames flickered around Pluto's fingertips as he issued the command to attack. A chain of violent explosions erupted across the battlefield. Fire engulfed the giant leopard as countless blasts detonated around its body. The dungeon ruler released an agonizing roar while struggling against the devastating assault. As soon as the fear effect expired, the wounded beast lunged through the burning flames in an attempt to destroy the explosives before more could detonate. Pluto remained completely composed. Raising his scythe once again, he immediately activated the terrifying eye a second time. The enormous crimson eye reappeared overhead, instantly plunging the battlefield back into overwhelming psychological pressure. The beast froze once more, becoming helpless as another relentless series of explosions consumed it. The continuous bombardment left the monster with no opportunity to escape or fight back. When the smoke finally dispersed, the Dungeon King had been completely defeated. A flood of experience poured into Pluto, pushing him to level 11. Looking over his status panel, he marveled at just how extraordinary the rewards inside the Blessing Rift truly were. While reviewing the newly gained benefits, he noticed that leveling up had unlocked yet another restriction-breaking ability. The notification introduced a skill known as Ethereal Form, a defensive technique that temporarily transformed its user into an intangible existence. Reading the description carefully, Pluto was astonished to discover that the ability granted complete immunity to every form of physical attack while it remained active. After testing his newly unlocked ethereal form, Pluto quickly realized that its greatest weakness was the enormous amount of mana it consumed. If he wanted to use the technique effectively in future battles, he would need to expand his mana reserves significantly. As he considered his next steps, a brilliant flash caught his attention from deeper within the dungeon. In the distance, a towering pillar of golden light pierced the sky, signaling that the defeated dungeon boss had left behind a legendary reward. Far from the Blessing Rift, a lavish mansion stood quietly in one of the city's most prestigious districts. Inside, Adrian sat alone in an elegant lounge, holding a glass of wine while resentment filled his thoughts. Every memory of his encounter with Pluto replayed vividly in his mind. The image of the young necromancer standing fearlessly beneath that terrifying purple aura refused to disappear, and the humiliation he had suffered before the entire academy continued to torment him. Unable to control his rage, Adrian crushed the wine glass in his bare hand, crimson liquid mixed with blood as it dripped onto the floor. Hearing the noise, a butler hurried over in concern, only to be ordered to clean the mess immediately because an important visitor was expected. After the servant withdrew, Adrian silently vowed that Pluto would eventually pay for disgracing him. Soon afterward, the elderly butler returned and formally announced that the guest had arrived. Adrian dismissed him once more, instructing that no one disturb the upcoming meeting. The servant bowed respectfully before leaving the room. A man draped in a long, dark blue cloak entered the mansion. An unusual bow infused with mysterious energy rested across his back. As he walked through the halls, whispers spread among the household staff. Even the experienced butler admitted that the stranger's reputation was far more frightening than the sinister aura surrounding him. The visitor was Cedric, a renowned mercenary, famous for eliminating targets from extraordinary distances without leaving evidence behind. After introducing himself and displaying his impressive rank, he explained that missions involving defenseless women or children required a much higher fee. Adrian immediately clarified that his target was simply a young man. Cedric seemed almost disappointed by the lack of challenge and casually settled into a seat. After studying his client for only a few moments, however, he unexpectedly concluded that the intended victim must be an exceptionally dangerous individual. The observation completely surprised Adrian, who wondered how such a conclusion had been reached before revealing any details. Cedric merely explained that the answer was obvious. If someone as capable as Adrian felt the need to hire a professional assassin instead of handling the problem personally, then the opponent had to possess extraordinary ability. Swallowing his pride, Adrian reluctantly admitted that the target was only a young necromancer. Cedric frowned in confusion. Ordinary necromancers were widely considered weak, burdened by long summoning cooldowns that allowed only a single skeleton to be called every 30 minutes. Embarrassed by the explanation, Adrian forced an awkward smile while acknowledging the common belief. The mercenary laughed openly at the situation. The idea that a supposedly powerful warrior required hired assistance to eliminate a beginner amused him greatly. Growing increasingly frustrated, Adrian insisted that Pluto was nothing like an ordinary necromancer. The young prodigy had grown stronger at an unbelievable rate and had already become the Dragon Guild's most valuable rising talent. The mention of the Dragon Guild immediately changed Cedric's expression. The mission suddenly became far more serious. For a brief moment, Adrian feared the mercenary might reject the contract altogether. Instead, Cedric smiled coldly and simply announced that the price had increased dramatically. Relief washed over Adrian. Confident in his family's immense wealth, he assured the assassin that cost would never become an obstacle. Satisfied with the agreement, Cedric requested only a photograph and basic information about the target, promising that locating him would be effortless. With complete confidence, the mercenary guaranteed that the young necromancer would disappear without leaving behind the slightest trace. Consumed by revenge, Adrian admitted that he already knew exactly where Pluto lived and possessed every detail necessary for the hunt. As Cedric prepared to leave, he remarked that the mission itself would be simple, although unexpected complications were always possible. An oppressive aura suddenly spread from the assassin as he fixed Adrian with a chilling stare, silently questioning whether his abilities were being doubted. The overwhelming pressure immediately silenced the young noble. Shaking nervously, Adrian hurriedly denied any lack of confidence. Cedric turned away without another glance, dismissing the concerns of someone who had already been defeated by a mere academy student. Once the mercenary departed, Adrian collapsed back onto the sofa. Humiliated once again, he clenched his fists as obsession consumed his thoughts. Exhaustion, resentment, and wounded pride blended together until only one desire remained. He no longer cared how victory was achieved, so long as Pluto disappeared forever. Meanwhile, back inside the Blessing Rift, Pluto finally reached the source of the golden light. The legendary reward materialized as an enchanted dagger that greatly increased agility while reducing the mana cost of spatial magic. After examining the weapon carefully, Pluto concluded that it offered little benefit to his own fighting style. Rather than using it himself, he decided it would make an excellent item to sell in the future. Looking over the valuable treasure, he quietly appreciated Aaron's generosity. Without the legendary key, none of these extraordinary rewards would have been possible. Satisfied with everything he had gained, Pluto stepped through the dimensional gateway to return home before an important meeting scheduled for the following day. Dark energy gathered once again inside his modest apartment as the portal reopened in the center of the room. the champion quietly stepped back into his small residence, bringing his long night of exploration to an end. After spending time inside the vast dungeon, the cramped apartment suddenly felt even smaller than before. He briefly reflected on how confining the room now seemed, compared to the enormous world hidden beyond the rift. The silence lasted only an instant. Without warning, a glowing arrow tore through the apartment window, shattering the glass into thousands of fragments. The projectile flew directly toward Pluto's chest with deadly precision. However, his body remained in ethereal form. Instead of striking him, the magical arrow passed harmlessly through his intangible form before burying itself deep into the wooden floor behind him. Far away, atop the roof of a distant building, Cedric slowly lowered his enchanted bow. Believing the perfectly aimed shot had eliminated its target instantly, the mercenary calmly prepared to leave, completely unaware that his assassination attempt had failed. At the headquarters of the nation's leading guild, the president reviews Pluto's incredible result of 200 talent points. An elderly advisor explains that even the current guild leader became famous with a far lower score, proving Pluto's extraordinary potential. Looking over the city, the president believes the young hunter could change the country's future and asks about his class. The advisor reveals that Pluto is a necromancer. The answer leaves the president speechless, because necromancers are known for having severe growth limits. However, the advisor insists Pluto has already shattered every restriction of his class by unlocking the extremely rare ability to summon undead without normal limitations. He also confirms that Pluto achieved everything while using only an ordinary staff. Realizing such a prodigy could one day command an immortal army, the president decides he must meet Pluto immediately. When asked about Pluto's whereabouts, the advisor explains that he gave the young necromancer a special key to explore a dangerous rift. Although the president worries about the risks, the advisor remains confident that even a basic healer would be enough to support Pluto. The president concludes that the boy may become the nation's greatest hope in the coming war. Elsewhere that night, a glowing blue arrow tears through the city before crashing through the window of Pluto's apartment. Fired by the mercenary Cedric Thornhill, the attack appears to strike Pluto directly in the back. Watching from a distant rooftop, Cedric believes the assassination is complete and waits for the aftermath. Instead, the body dissolves into dark energy, revealing it was only an illusion created by Pluto's ethereal ability. Having barely survived the surprise attack, Pluto recovers inside the apartment and realizes his intangible form saved his life. Though relieved, he is furious that he came so close to death. Pluto activates his terrifying gaze, causing a massive crimson eye to appear across the night sky. Cedric is horrified, convinced his attack should have succeeded. Fear spreads through his body, leaving him temporarily unable to move. The mercenary assumes the long distance will eventually break the spell and decides to endure it. Pluto reveals that he had expected his enemy to approach after believing the attack had succeeded. As Cedric remains distracted, a skeleton soldier secretly appears behind him. Before the mercenary understands what is happening, the undead warrior strikes him from behind. Cedric destroys the skeleton with his superior strength and mocks the weak attack, believing the danger has passed. Just as he prepares to counterattack, the paralysis suddenly returns. Standing in the deserted streets below, Pluto casts his terrifying spell once again, and the enormous red eye dominates the night sky, tightening its grip on the trapped assassin. Cedric trembles as he remembers that necromancers normally require 30 minutes to summon each undead servant, believing that limitation will give him the advantage. Pluto, however, recognizes that the assassin is 5 levels stronger and prepares to rely on the army he has already built. Dark souls and purple flames swirl around Pluto as dozens of skeletons appear at once. Cedric is horrified by the overwhelming number of undead and realizes Adrienne's information about Pluto's strength was completely wrong. Losing every advantage, he watches as Pluto orders the skeletons to attack. The undead race up the side of the skyscraper like spiders, climbing the glass walls with incredible speed. Their relentless ascent shatters the windows before they surround Cedric on the rooftop. One skeleton immediately launches an attack, leaving the assassin with no chance to escape. Watching from below, Pluto briefly regrets not having a spell that allows him to fly. Cornered by the undead, Cedric surrenders and begs to negotiate directly with Pluto. The necromancer soon arrives on the rooftop and calmly listens as the mercenary offers information in exchange for his life. Cedric promises to reveal the identity of the person who hired him, but Pluto already names Adrian before the confession is complete. Shocked that his secret has already been exposed, Cedric desperately offers his services as a professional assassin instead. Pluto dismisses the proposal, deciding the mercenary's true value will only come after his death. Without hesitation, Pluto raises his scythe and orders his skeleton to execute the kneeling assassin. The undead warrior delivers the fatal strike, ending Cedric's life. After the battle, Pluto approaches the fallen body, but collapses to one knee from severe mana exhaustion. Relieved that the dangerous hunt is finally over. Reviewing the fight, Pluto realizes how much mana his strongest abilities consumed. He recalls that he had secretly summoned a skeleton in the hallway before the ambush and ordered it to track the hidden sniper. While the skeleton closed in, Pluto intentionally used himself as bait to lure Cedric into a false sense of victory. Recovering slowly, Pluto acknowledges the assassin's remarkable long-range accuracy before taking out a special artifact. Hoping he still has enough mana, he begins a new ritual over Cedric's body. The system removes another evolution restriction, allowing a skeleton to absorb the defeated hunter's essence. A sphere of dark energy captures Cedric's power and transfers it into a basic skeleton. Violent purple flames engulf the undead as its body rapidly transforms. When the magical storm fades, the once ordinary skeleton has evolved into a powerful undead marksman, wearing the appearance and abilities of an elite mercenary, creating Pluto's first high-level skeletal shooter. The newly evolved undead marksman gains piercing blue eyes, a dark hat, exceptional tracking skills, and deadly accuracy. Pluto admires his new summon, but the system immediately warns that the evolution cannot be completed without an appropriate weapon. After carefully examining the situation, Pluto realizes the missing requirement is Cedric's magical bow. The weapon floats before him, and he discovers it grants 50 additional magic points. Although he finds the reward somewhat modest, he hands the bow to the undead marksman. Blue energy surrounds the skeleton, completing its evolution. Pluto concludes that an undead archer can only reach its full potential while wielding a proper bow, and instructs the summon to use it until something better is found. To Pluto's surprise, the skeleton responds verbally, demonstrating intelligence and unwavering loyalty. It then respectfully asks for a proper name, instead of being identified only by its class. Realizing his first evolved servant deserves more than a generic title, Pluto begins searching his memories for inspiration. His thoughts drift back to a previous life, amid the ruins of a war-torn city. There, he watched a legendary silver-haired sniper prepare an impossible long-range shot, while other soldiers praised the marksman's reputation for eliminating targets from miles away. The sniper calmly took aim at an enemy commander ordering the execution of innocent captives. A single perfectly placed shot instantly killed the commander, throwing the enemy camp into chaos. Amazed by the display, the younger Pluto eagerly asked the veteran to share his secrets. The sniper simply introduced himself as Archer. Returning to the present, Pluto decides to honor that unforgettable warrior by naming his evolved skeleton Archer. The undead gratefully accepts the name and pledges even greater loyalty before rejoining Pluto's growing army. The system then reveals that Pluto has filled only one of his 5 available evolution slots. Understanding how valuable those limited upgrades are, he resolves to reserve them only for truly exceptional soldiers rather than ordinary undead. Just as he finishes planning his next steps, a massive green magic circle appears behind him. Thinking another attack has begun, Pluto prepares himself, only to recognize the teleportation spell from the Academy examination. An elderly advisor sent by the guild's supreme leader arrives to ensure Pluto's safety. Looking around the shattered rooftop, the advisor is stunned by the destruction and silently wonders what kind of battle the young necromancer had just survived. As dawn approaches, a tense silence settles over the rooftop, while the elder questions Pluto about the ambush that occurred immediately after the Academy exam. Pluto is relieved he hid his evolved marksman just before the advisor arrived, keeping his secret safe. When asked about his supposed teammates, Pluto struggles to answer, drawing a disappointed look from the elder. The advisor scolds Pluto for ignoring repeated warnings about entering dangerous places alone, reminding him that his death would have been a devastating loss. Pluto confidently insists he can handle dungeons suited to his level. The elder is reminded of the same stubborn confidence he once saw in the guild's leader. Changing the subject, Pluto wonders why the advisor arrived so much earlier than expected. The elder explains that he has direct orders to escort Pluto to the guild headquarters immediately. After assuring him that a cleanup team will investigate the rooftop and handle the assassin's body, The two leave together. On the way, Pluto notices there is no teleportation portal and assumes the spell requires lengthy preparation. The advisor explains that he uses special prearranged spatial routes and then reveals he had secretly placed a temporary tracking seal on Pluto's clothing. Shocked by the invasion of privacy, Pluto protests, but the elder reassures him that the disposable mark has already disappeared. Outside the building, a luxurious black limousine arrives. Guild staff respectfully greet the elder before receiving orders to investigate the rooftop and identify the dead mercenary. Watching the exchange, Pluto realizes the guild's support personnel are highly disciplined. After Pluto and the advisor leave, one staff member assumes the recruit must be an extraordinary genius. Another secretly scans Pluto's profile, but is stunned to see only an average rank. Believing such a contradiction impossible, the investigators conclude Pluto somehow detected the scan and disguised his true information, leaving them deeply unsettled by his apparent ability. During the ride, Pluto quietly prepares himself for a meeting with the strongest leader in the country. The advisor encourages him to stay calm as the limousine reaches the massive headquarters of the Azure Dragon Guild. Awed by the enormous fortress, Pluto follows the elder through its towering gates and grand halls. Elite guards salute the vice president with great respect before escorting them deeper into the headquarters. Pluto notices that even the escorts are level 50 paladins, equipped with rare gear. The guards stop before a gigantic steel door, explaining that their rank does not permit them to enter any farther. The advisor thanks them and tells Pluto that he must open the entrance himself. Realizing that even powerful warriors have limits within the guild's hierarchy, Pluto pushes open the massive door and steps inside. In the luxurious office beyond, the guild leader stands overlooking the city. Without wasting time, he lists the details of Pluto's battle against the high-level assassin, demonstrating the guild's astonishing investigative speed. He points out that even gifted hunters rarely defeat opponents several levels above them, and questions how a novice managed to kill an enemy 7 levels stronger. The leader further argues that ordinary necromancer summons should never have been able to catch a long-range assassin. Rising from his seat, he demands to know how many secrets Pluto is hiding. As the interrogation intensifies, an overwhelming killing intent fills the room, surrounding Pluto with a crushing magical pressure, unlike anything he has ever experienced. Elsewhere, Adrian repeatedly fails to contact the mercenary he hired. Growing increasingly frustrated, he crushes his phone after realizing the assassin has disappeared without a trace. Convinced that ordinary mercenaries are useless, Adrian reaches for another phone and reluctantly calls the only person he believes can solve the problem, his older brother. After hearing the story, his brother becomes furious that a fellow student humiliated the Blackwood family by forcing Adrian to bark like a dog. Although he is in the middle of a guild mission, he promises to return and personally eliminate Pluto. At that moment, he effortlessly defeats a level 35 polar bear with a devastating flaming punch, revealing the overwhelming strength that earned him his reputation. Meanwhile, inside the Azure Dragon Guild headquarters, the guild leader continues pressuring Pluto to reveal every secret behind his incredible power. Pluto refuses to answer, insisting that his abilities are none of the leader's concern. Enraged by the response, the commander unleashes an overwhelming aura that engulfs the room. Pluto immediately activates his fear-inducing gaze and summons a battalion of undead soldiers, hoping to slow the attack while searching for an escape. The plan fails almost instantly. The leader charges forward with overwhelming speed and power, shrugging off Pluto's illusion spell after only a brief moment. The system confirms that the fear effect barely slowed him, proving the enormous difference between their abilities. Desperate to buy time, Pluto orders his skeletons to block the advancing warrior. The commander tears through the undead with ease, reducing them to scattered bones. Pluto quickly summons a gunpowder skeleton and orders it to detonate inside the office. A massive explosion engulfs the room, but the guild leader continues advancing without hesitation. Pluto responds by summoning even more explosive skeletons, creating a relentless chain of detonations, powerful enough to shake the upper floors of the guild headquarters. Outside, the guards hear the violent tremors and realize the new recruit possesses extraordinary destructive power. After exhausting a huge amount of mana, Pluto waits for the smoke to clear, convinced that no one could survive such concentrated explosions. Instead, the guild leader emerges completely unharmed, his silver armor untouched. Pluto is left frozen in disbelief as the commander casually brushes away the dust, showing complete indifference to the full force of the necromancer's strongest attacks. Furious that his attacks have failed, Pluto prepares to summon hundreds of explosive skeletons in a final attempt to overwhelm the guild leader. Before he can act, Victor moves with incredible speed, grabs Pluto by the throat, and lifts him into the air. Demanding to know the truth behind Pluto's hidden powers, the commander tightens his grip while Pluto struggles to breathe. Even while being choked, Pluto refuses to answer. Instead, he smiles sarcastically and boldly responds with a disrespectful gesture. Victor studies the fearless young necromancer for a moment before suddenly releasing him. As Pluto catches his breath, the guild leader unexpectedly announces that he has passed the test. Confused, Pluto learns that the entire confrontation was arranged to measure his courage and determination under extreme pressure. The elder admits he requested the life-or-death trial, while Victor explains that someone worthy of the guild's investment must possess both strength and unshakable resolve. Impressed by Pluto's unique summoning abilities and fearless attitude, Victor formally introduces himself as the guild leader. Pluto calmly returns the introduction, and the two finally greet each other with a handshake. Victor then explains that Pluto's true strength still requires proper evaluation. Rather than another unfair duel, he proposes a far more dangerous challenge, clearing a level 15 cave alone on its highest difficulty. The elder is alarmed by the harsh request, knowing even Victor once required a team of 4 to survive that same trial. Victor promises that Pluto will still receive a place in the guild, even if he fails, but success will determine whether he earns the organization's full support. Without hesitation, Pluto confidently accepts the mission. Victor quietly hopes the young necromancer's confidence is backed by genuine strength. As Pluto leaves the headquarters, he reflects on the terrifying monsters waiting inside the cave. Although he knows he is 4 levels below the recommended requirement, he decides to face the challenge regardless. After Pluto departs, the elder questions Victor's harsh decision. Victor responds that the future holds far greater threats, and only hunters capable of overcoming impossible odds will be able to protect the world. Soon, Pluto reaches the entrance to the Goblin Cave. The system confirms his mana has fully recovered, leaving him in peak condition. Activating the dungeon's highest difficulty, he steps into the Crimson Portal without hesitation, as a sinister aura and ghostly skulls warn of the danger ahead. Nearby hunters are shocked to see a lone student willingly enter the apocalyptic-level dungeon. Inside the cave, Pluto carefully advances through the dark stone passages, remembering his academy lessons, while sensing the glowing eyes of vicious creatures lurking in the shadows. A massive horde of green-skinned goblins filled the cavern, their pointed ears, crude weapons, and savage behavior making the underground passage feel like a battlefield. Armed with sharpened spears and heavy wooden clubs, the creatures eagerly rushed toward the lone intruder. Standing calmly with his dark scythe in hand, Pluto surveyed the tunnel and estimated that nearly 100 hostile monsters were waiting ahead. Rather than being intimidated, he considered the numbers an advantage. With a wave of his magic, he summoned an army of skeletal warriors, confident that overwhelming the enemy with superior numbers would secure victory. The Undead Legion surged into the cave, colliding head-on with the goblin horde. Bone and steel clashed against wood and crude weapons as the battle erupted throughout the tunnel. One system notification after another rewarded Pluto with experience for every enemy his army defeated. The increased difficulty of the dungeon significantly boosted those rewards, and he was pleased to confirm that he had already reached level 11. Once the initial battle ended, the cave entrance was littered with fallen goblins. Pluto calmly stepped over the defeated monsters and continued following his advancing army deeper into the dungeon. As he traveled farther into the winding tunnels, he reflected on one weakness of his abilities. His summons could not move too far away from him, preventing him from clearing dangerous areas while remaining completely safe. For a brief moment, he considered hanging back, but quickly dismissed the thought with a faint smile. Staying close to the front suited him better. While the skeletal soldiers continued eliminating scattered goblins, Pluto noticed something unsettling. The main route through the dungeon felt strangely empty for a location classified at such an extreme difficulty. That unusual silence convinced him the dungeon had not yet revealed its true challenge. His suspicion was confirmed moments later. A deafening crash echoed through the cave as the entire tunnel began to tremble. Rocks broke loose from the ceiling while clouds of dust filled the air. The violent shaking grew stronger with every passing second, signaling the approach of something enormous. Pluto immediately ordered his skeletal warriors to charge toward the source of the disturbance. They disappeared into the darkness, but almost instantly, one of the undead was obliterated by a single devastating blow. The skeleton shattered so completely that even Pluto was caught off guard. It was the first time he had ever witnessed one of his summons destroyed with such overwhelming force. Remaining composed, he quickly concluded that the true ruler of the dungeon had finally appeared. Heavy footsteps continued shaking the cavern as the mysterious creature approached. Hidden behind his advancing skeletons, Pluto watched with growing anticipation, almost admiring the dramatic entrance of his opponent. As the dust gradually settled, an enormous armored monster emerged from the darkness. Towering over the battlefield, the giant blocked the passage and faced the approaching undead without the slightest concern. Pluto immediately recognized a problem. There had not been enough time to prepare his explosive gunpowder skeletons before the battle began. Without hesitation, he ordered part of his army to hold the giant in place, while he quickly transformed additional summons into living explosives. The massive green-skinned boss regarded the charging skeletons with complete contempt. Swinging its gigantic wooden club in a single sweeping motion, it crushed several undead warriors and scattered the rest across the cavern. The brief distraction gave Pluto exactly the opening he needed. As he hurriedly completed the explosive conversion, the giant's glowing eye suddenly locked onto him instead of the surrounding skeletons. Realizing the true threat, the monster ignored every decoy and shifted its attention directly toward the necromancer. Pluto immediately understood the danger. With a furious roar, the boss raised its enormous weapon before bringing it crashing down. The impact unleashed a devastating shockwave that ripped through the ground, shattered stone, and hurled debris throughout the tunnel. There was no time to dodge. At the very last instant, Pluto activated ethereal form. His body dissolved into intangible magical mist, allowing the destructive attack to pass harmlessly through him. Once the danger had passed, he returned to his physical form, lowering his head briefly as he acknowledged that the defensive skill had saved his life once again. The near-death experience erased any remaining restraint. A cold fury settled over him as his crimson eye began to glow. Without hesitation, he unleashed his fear-inducing illusion. The enormous scarlet eye manifested within the darkness of the cavern, projecting overwhelming terror directly onto the dungeon boss. The colossal monster froze instantly. Paralyzed by supernatural fear, it became completely helpless, while Pluto calmly walked forward, alongside the skeletons carrying explosive barrels. Watching the immobilized giant, he regarded it as nothing more than another ingredient waiting to be prepared. Twirling his scythe with effortless confidence, he advanced toward the trapped monster while his undead servants surrounded it. One after another, they stacked gunpowder barrels around the giant's feet until it was completely encircled. Only after every explosive had been carefully positioned did Pluto begin his final attack. A relentless chain of detonations erupted throughout the cavern. The explosions merged into a massive inferno that engulfed the giant's body, filling the underground chamber with roaring flames and a towering cloud of fire.